Implausible Nature now has dice. That's right, you can get these awesome D6s made by our partner, Baron of Dice. These custom dice have the Implausible Nature logo on the six side and also come with square corners, which means they will roll more evenly than rounded corner dice. Head on over to baronofdice.com and use discount code IN40K to get a discount on your order and support us at the same time. Check out his full collection of dice for all your gaming needs with the link down in the description.
Welcome to Implausible Nature, your home for all things Black Templar. On today's video, we're talking about the brand new season of Warhammer, they're calling it now, where we are going to be changing over from Leviathan mission rules to Pariah Nexus. GW previewed these a couple days ago, and we're going to kind of talk about what they revealed and what that means for us with our list building and tactics and how we're going to approach the game, because there's definitely going to be some decent shifts, I think, in how people utilize the units in their army. So let's get started and talk about this. They previewed 2 mission rules, and something that they made note of, and we see several times in this preview, is that battle line units are going to play a more important role in the game, basically rewarding you for utilizing battle line units. Now, are they going to become mandatory? I think that remains to be seen, but based on their article, I don't think they're going to become mandatory. But having them in your list is certainly going to benefit you more than not. So let's take a look at these first 2 mission rules that they previewed, both of which feature battle line keyword things. So now remember, the mission rule is you have your primary mission, your secondaries, which are usually your tactical cards. The mission rules are like any special additional rules. A lot of tournaments, because based on GW suggestions, use Chilling Rain, which is nothing. It's no extra rules. And that's for balance purposes based on that. But in your home games, in your pickup games, you're going to see a lot more of these. So this first one is Raise Banners Returns. It's very different from its predecessor, though, which was a secondary objective. This one is a mission rule, and what it says is at the end of each player's turn, if a battle line unit from their army is within range of an objective marker that player controls, that unit raises a banner on that objective marker. So you don't have to do anything. It just happens. That player scores 1 victory point, which is counted toward their secondary mission score, and that player's units can no longer raise a banner on that objective marker. The other one here is in the first battle round, each player can set up battle line units from strategic reserves in the reinforcement steps of their movement phase. So this is key because you can now set up a battle line unit, or possibly 2, in the first turn of the game. This is something that's reserved for only a very select few units that are able to do this, namely things like drop pods. So if they do so, those units must be set up wholly within 6 inches of any battlefield edge, but no model in those units can be set up within the enemy deployment zone. So basically same rules as turn 2. And the points total of units that a player can set up in this way cannot exceed 10% of their total points limit for the chosen battle size as shown below. So obviously for standard games, 2,000 points, it's going to be 200 points, which is limiting, but certainly potentially a unit or 2, depending on what units you pick. So thoughts on these 2, Bob?
All right, so I'll start with the rapid escalation because I'm thinking about it. So one thing to note with this is obviously you're picking your strategic reserves before the game starts. You can pick the 200 that you want to come out and get onto an objective right away, potentially. Now, this has some play for if you have the first turn, so you can get some strategic shots off right away on an opponent. Where you would not normally get that. So you get that alpha strike potentially with your battle line units. In our side of things, there's not a ton that you have, but potentially now you might be seeing some Gravis units and like heavy intercessors that might have some play here with something like this, or uh, obviously you have the Primaris Crusader squads that can pop out. But I think a lot of those times you can get those onto the board um, and advance them um,
They have
with
scouts
their
too. I
they have
mean,
scouts.
Primaris Crusader Squad seems appealing. The only time I would probably do them over something else is if I felt like there just wasn't enough terrain or not a good position to start them on, and then start them up further up the board. Which is
Yep.
certainly a possibility, but then they lose their scout ability. Obviously, um, but I think intercessors. There could be a play here for intercessors, both heavy and regular. Even assault intercessors, could be an interesting way to deploy the Emperor's Champion with intercessors. I know a lot of people are fans of that combo already, but you could potentially ditch the Impulsor for them and just pop them out turn one somewhere.
Yep.
It'd be a really cheap unit. It's 150 points combined. So you'd fit within that 200 cap and, could be cheap bait, right? You guys know that I like to use the word popcorn units. Could be a cheap popcorn unit sort of bait type of thing. So I think this is definitely interesting. Now, obviously, this is not going to come into play every game because you're going to randomly draw mission rules or decide
Yep.
on them ahead of time. So this won't be something you'll be able to do all the time, but when it comes up, certainly an interesting option. I think the
Now, I think
raise. Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing to note on that is you definitely want to make sure that you're thinking defensively with this as well, because there's not a lot of great takes for us for battle line to use for rapid escalations, as you kind of mentioned. I mean, there's some play on there, potentially get a good unit strategically on depending on the matchup, but a lot of other armies will be able to take advantage of this significantly. Drukari come to mind immediately. Being able to get those right away up the board. Leagues of Votan are going to take advantage of this, Adeptus Sororitas. So differing types of armies will really love this. So you want to be able to, if you know you have this, definitely make sure that you're prepared for dealing with whatever comes into the board.
Yep. So thoughts on race banners, Bob?
I think this one is something that we definitely have to be aware of. It synergizes with the primary, which presumably is not going to change. As far as getting points, generating primary points. You want to be on objectives. So this is going to be something that we've been kind of used to in previous editions, and making sure that we had battle line units to be able to utilize the uh, or get some additional points off of those objectives. Um, One thing to note, because it goes to secondary missions, you're going to have to be careful with those secondary missions. We're going to kind of get into a couple of them here. I think there's maybe one that was previewed, one or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not going to have a full piece of the puzzle here, but if they're generating secondary points off of the mission rules, I would speculate that we're going to see decreased ability to generate points off the secondaries themselves. So that's something to think about. So you might want to look at increasing your battle line, just as an
If
aside.
you're not already taking Crusader squads or something like that, I personally
Yep.
generally take two Primaris Crusader squads, usually two 10-mans. I like the scouts ability on them. I think they're just a great utility unit,
Yep.
to do score points and things like that. So it does say in the article fully half of the mission rules benefit battle line in some way.
Yep.
So I forget how many total mission rules there were in Leviathan, or that I don't think they mentioned how many they're going to be in here, but half of them will, have something to do with battle line. So, regardless of how often you end up playing these particular two, you're gonna see things that benefit battle line a lot more often.
Yeah, and there's nine primary missions right now, so you can probably expect the same.
Other mission rules, yeah. So speaking of primary missions, they did preview one. This one is called Terraform, which is a bizarre name for 40K. I don't see why we would be terraforming something in the middle of a battle. That doesn't make sense to me. But regardless, that's what they named it. And what it says is they've officially brought back actions. So in Leviathan, there are actions. They're not called actions, but they are
Yep.
essentially actions, right, of what they used to be, where you have to be eligible to shoot, then you don't get to shoot or charge or do anything else, right, because you've done an action. Now they're officially back. So this terraform is an action. It starts in your shooting phase, one or more units from your army, each within a different range, or in range of a different objective marker that is not within your deployment zone and has not been terraformed. So note that you can do this with more than one unit, which is pretty nice. And then it completes at the end of your opponent's next turn, or at the end of the battle, whichever comes first, right? If the unit performing this action is still within range of the same objective marker, and you control that objective marker. So you got to control it. You got to still be alive. Sorry, intercessors. If you die on the objective and your opponent doesn't control it, you still don't get this because the unit has to be in range of it, and they're not in range if they're dead. Same thing for any other unit that has that intercessor OBSEC-like ability. If completed, each of these objective markers is terraformed. Well, what does that get you? So in the second battle round onwards, at the end of the command phase or the end of your turn, if it is the fifth battle round and you are going second, the player whose turn it is scores victory points as follows: up to 15 victory points per turn, 4 objective markers for each objective, 4 points for each objective marker they control, 2 points for each objective marker they have terraformed during the battle. Note the above VP are cumulative, so a player who controls one objective marker they have also terraformed will score 6 VP that turn. So this is really important to terraform those objectives as fast as humanly possible, because you're going to score 2 additional points for each one that you have terraformed during the battle, regardless of whether you control it or not. So that's really awesome, because if you get blown off on, like, you got to an enemy objective, you managed to hold it for a turn, and then they killed you, you've terraformed it now for the rest of the battle. You continue to earn points on it all game long, or however long the rest of the game lasts. So I think that's definitely really interesting. It kind of definitely brings to mind some of the units that are really popular right now are going to be really good at this sort of thing, presuming that they can survive, right? They got to survive. Scouts, Inceptors. I think Inceptors are going to be very good at this because they are fairly durable for what they do. Scouts are going to be tricky. You're going to have to hide them because they're super squishy. So,
Yep.
so yeah, I think this is a really interesting primary mission. What are your thoughts, Bob?
I like it a lot, actually. It does a lot of the things that we like to do already, is get on an objective straight away. Even though it has nothing to do with the battle line, our Primaris Crusader squads can get on no man's land objectives right away if we roll decently well with their advance. And we have the potential to get there. Just barely, but potentially can get onto an objective that's close enough with these, depending on how you deploy. Obviously, you do have to protect them. They have to survive until that next turn, but isn't that the case with most of the time when we're trying to get on objectives? So the point is, we're going to lose some offensive abilities, uh, but most time on our first, second turn, that's where we're prepping up anyway, and this will get you some additional primary points. And if you terraform, it's permanent. So you're just farming those points throughout the game. So I think that's a really cool ability there. Like you mentioned, infiltration is going to be really, really important for this. And I think we're going to start seeing a big swing towards some of those units going forward. So whether it be assassins or lone ops that have infiltration or scouts, things of those nature. Obviously, you have a couple different lone ops that can utilize that. Obviously, most of us are going to be using Calidus's, but you just got to be careful with that. Make sure they're not within the closest enemy target, so that you don't get shot off the board.
Yeah.
But that could be something that you can combo with a scout squad, get it on there, have the scout squad be that first thing, and hide your assassin behind a wall or something like that, and have it do. Um, so there's definitely plays that you can combo different units to make sure that you're getting that terraform right away. But I really kind of like the thematics of this, even though you're probably not going to be terraforming anything in the middle of a battle. But yeah, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I like the objective, the what it does. The theme of it doesn't make any sense, but that's fine. Um, it also allows you to do things like bait your opponent, right?
Yep.
I'm going to stick this scout squad over here on this objective, and I'm going to terraform it. And maybe your opponent doesn't really want to go that way, so they're either going to just give you free points for the rest of the game, or they're going to have to go deal with that unit. So you can kind of use it to kind of dictate the flow of the battle a little bit. So unfortunately, that's the only primary one that they primary objective that they previewed for us. However, we did get a secondary objective preview, so let's take a look at that. So this is a secondary mission. It says attacker, but we all know they're all exactly the same. This one is called Marked for Death. When drawn, your opponent must select 3 units from their army, on the battlefield. So you can't be like, oh, Necrons, these 3 things I got in reserves, they're going to be my thing. No, we can't do that. So if there are only 1 or 2 units from their army on the battlefield, they must select those units. If there are no units from their army on the battlefield, discard this card and draw a new secondary. And what it says, at the end of either player's turn, you score 5 victory points if 1 or more of the selected units were destroyed or removed from the battlefield for any other reason this turn. So I'm going to venture to say that if you put them in reserves, that
Yes.
also triggers this.
Yes. I was just going to say that. So that will...
based on the wording, for any other reason means put in reserves. So this can really hose armies. Well, now your opponent chooses them, I guess, right? So
yeah, but they're not going to want to put it on a picky uppy unit though, because of this.
Yeah, they're going to want to put it on something that they don't think you're going to have either the opportunity or the line of sight to kill. I think this is a really interesting secondary, and I like it because you only have to kill 1, whereas in the past, in like maybe 8th or 9th edition, this would have been like score 1 VP for each unit you kill or some nonsense like that. So it's basically garbage, but all you have to do is kill 1, you get 5 points. I think that that's reasonable, especially since your opponent gets to pick those units.
Yeah, 1 out of 3 units. This is a great secondary. I think most people are going to take this. It's going to be especially good change out if you're doing tactical missions on this. So this is going to be something you can do at any point into the game. They pick. It's obviously going to get better towards the end of the game
because they'll have fewer things to pick from. Yeah.
Yep, and presumably you will as well. But it's easier to kill things towards the end of the game. But this also, with that wording, assuming they don't come out with a commentary saying otherwise, I think your interpretation is correct. You can't put anything into strategic reserves. So that's going to be like the Calidus. You can't put it on a Calidus.
Yeah.
And then take it off the board and make it unscorable. I think it's worded very well, so it's not something that you can just deny your opponent points on. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, now it doesn't say on this preview whether this is a fixed mission or not, or fixed secondary or not. I don't know if that's something that they intentionally left off. Maybe, I don't think this is going to be a fixed one, just to the nature of the way it is. But we'll see. Either way, I really like it. I think it's a solid secondary. The one of the other big changes that they revealed in this is gambits are gone, which is
Good.
great because they were useless and impossible to achieve, and you probably weren't going to win the game anyway with a gambit, right? So sorry, X-Men, you can have Gambit back. He sucked. So
I've only successfully pulled it off twice.
yeah. So instead, it's secret missions. So you get to be James Bond and James Bonded up with your secret mission. They do say there's 4 of them as before. However, there's no random draw. You just pick one. So I like that a lot too. So you can't get boned. You could like look at them and be like, based on your army, if I need to, which one of these can I achieve? We're going to go through all 4 of them. They did reveal all 4 of them, surprisingly. But this is how it works. It says at the end of the game, if you've completed this special condition, you'll earn, as GW says, a juicy 20 victory points. There is some risk to go with the reward, though. If you pick a secret mission, you cannot score more than 20 victory points on your primary mission. You can normally score up to 50 from primary missions, so opting for a secret mission that will limit you to 40 victory points total from both. Even if you succeed, you'll need to decide if the primary mission is a lost cause before making that last-ditch tactics switch for points. So this is obviously a double-edged sword.
Yep.
You're going to possibly lose points on primary. However, I think we've all been in those games where you're just like, at some point in the game, you realize, I'm not going to score these primaries. Like, I can do some of these secondaries that come up, but you're just getting hammered on primary, and you're not going to be able to score a lot. Maybe then this will give you the boost you need to stay in the game at least, or at least keep it close.
Yep.
There will be definitely, once we see all the primary missions, I think this will be a great video for us to do a full tactics video on when should we do this kind of thing. Once we get some games under our belts and whatnot. So
Yeah, I think this is going to be a situation where like you are holding your home objective the whole game, but you just can't quite get to the center and overtake it. And this might be something that if you're behind, because I said that's a stipulation, you have to be behind your opponent in primary. That this might be something that you can take that 10-point hit and max out at 40 points is better than only getting 20.
20. Yeah.
So
So
I think
yeah, I agree.
yeah, I think it's something that's a good change. The gambits were worthless, and this
I
doesn't
mean, it
seem.
can't be worse. Let's put it that way. So let's take a look at these. The first one is command insertion. Of course, these are all worth 20 victory points, even though it says it on the card. You score it at the end of the battle. I imagine they all score at the end of the battle. This one says your warlord is within range of one or more objective markers in your opponent's deployment zone that you control. So you got to control that objective and have your warlord in range of it. Now, this, depending on the army, is possibly very easy or possibly very hard, depending on who your warlord is. So, is this one we're going to be picking a lot? Probably not, unless we have, we're running like something like Firestorm and 6 aggressors, or 10-man Terminator unit with a chaplain, right? Something, a tanky, durable unit that can get there and stay there kind of thing. So it also does have to be in your opponent's deployment zone, which can be tricky if you're struggling to control objectives to begin with.
Yep, I agree. This one's going to be, unless you build around it, and you honestly shouldn't probably build around secret missions. It's just kind of like one of those plays that hey, I got the opportunity to use it. But a good example could be something like Chaplain with Jump Pack. leading the jump pack assault intercessors. You toss Warlord on him instead of maybe Helbricht or whatever, and that might be a play that you have just in your back pocket simply because of the where you place the Warlord. Um, and you might be able
Yep.
to take over. So that's something that you can build your list around, just tricking around, where you put that warlord. Because right now there isn't a lot of play with the
No.
warlord. We just kind of just put it wherever it's the most durable. Um, but yeah, so
Yep.
that might be something that you think about going forward in your list building.
Yep. So the next one here is War of Attrition. One or more battle line units from your army are within your opponent's deployment zone, and one of the following conditions apply. There are no battle line units from your opponent's army on the battlefield, so you've killed them all, or they don't have any. Another incentive to take some, right? Every battle line unit from your opponent's army that is on the battlefield is within your opponent's deployment zone. So uh, this would be armies that are going to leave a squad of cheerleaders behind who are battle line to guard their home objective, kind of thing, or possibly bait them backwards depending on what type of unit they are. World eaters, you might be able to bait corn berserkers back into their deployment zone to come get you. Either way, I think this is much more achievable than the first one that we've seen here. Um, it does favor battle lines, so you'll need to again want to make sure knowing this exists, have some battle line because you automatically fulfill the condition number one if you don't have any. So yeah.
I think this one's definitely more achievable than the previous one, obviously, just simply because of the nature of uh, the mission. But I think this one's going to be very important that you have in the back of your mind, depending on your opponent. Yet again, so there's a lot of MSU lists out there that have transports, and they like to have their 5-man units flying around in their little transports, and it's hard to kill, and you can't kill enough of them that can simply just drop into your deployment zone. And whether you just got an infiltrator squad in your back deployment zone and that's all you have, this could cost you 20 points if you don't think about it in your battle. So you have to be aware of this, not only as like, how can I score it, but how can I prevent an accidental loss of 20 points to my opponent. So I think you have to now think about that. Where the gambits were just like, okay, it's just never going to happen because they were so difficult. This is something that you actually have to be tactically thinking about in every game now.
Yeah. Yep. Right. So next up is Shatter Cohesion. You choose one of these two conditions have to be fulfilled. One is there are no units from your opponent's army on the battlefield, or every unit from your opponent's army that is on the battlefield meets one or more of the following conditions. They're battle shocked below half strength. That unit is more than 3 inches away from all objective markers. So this one is interesting to me because if you're picking these, you're probably losing the game in some fashion or another. And you're doing this to try to score a chunk of points at the end of the game. If you're losing the game, you're not going to wipe your opponent off the board. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Like, I mean, yeah, I think that piece of it is next to impossible to achieve if you're losing the game. So that being said, the rest of them, below half strength, that's possibly doable. Also, more than 3 inches away from all objective markers, and it's meets one or more, right? So it's not like the whole army has to be more than 3 inches away. It's this unit's more than 3 inches away. Tick. That unit's below half strength. Tick. That unit's below half strength. Tick. Okay, cool. I've met all the conditions for the 3 units that you have left. So I score this. I think the second part of this is much more achievable. I don't think we're going to see too many people wiping their opponent and scoring this for the end. What do you think?
I think this is somewhat achievable for the right lists. Now, I think this opens the door for a lot more list building opportunities for people to build in the style of 5th edition. Uh, Leaf blower lists that don't want to move off their deployment zone and just sit there and blast you the entire game. Like the Taos of the world, they're not going to advance their things to the objectives. They're going to sacrifice those off the battle, and they're just going to keep blasting you. And the reality is, while you're getting those objectives, you're slowly running out of units, and then a lot of times is like, okay, well, I survived with enough through game turn 3 through those objectives and secondaries. Now they advance, but even though I don't have any units on my list, they advance up and they can't score enough primary. And that's been our saving grace. Now they have this where they can blast you for 3 turns and then decide to take this and then advance forward, and they'll get their primary and they get 20 points. So this can very quickly go the wrong direction for you. So this, you can build a list. Ironstorm comes to mind. This is a perfect strategy for Ironstorm that like to play back. They blast you and shoot and do a ton of damage to your opponent while kind of staying towards your deployment zone and then going after them late game. So this is something that you could build for with that style of list. Maybe even Firestorm. There's a few other lists that can do it for the Black Templars as well. But building for the table is how you want to approach this secret mission.
Now, that being said, it's only 20 points.
Yes.
So your opponent still has to score secondaries, which we've only seen one of. They still have to score some primary somehow. So while that makes the sort of kill everything strategy slightly more viable, it's still not a win con in and of itself. So we don't have to worry about that. But you're absolutely right. You know, it does reward armies that can kill a lot of things and don't necessarily need to move much. So they score enough to get the other 20 on primary. They'll have to still be able to score secondaries, and then they can go for this. So yeah. So the last one is Unbroken Wall, and it is you control 3 or more objective markers that are not within your deployment zone. So this one is interesting because, once again, if you're losing the game, this might be difficult. Now, that being said, a lot of weird things happen at the end of the game, right? Mm-hmm. This could be, and I don't know, if they said when you have to decide these, at the end of the 3rd battle round, starting with the player who went second. So I think the current gambits are at the beginning of the 3rd battle round. Is that right?
No, it's the same time.
It's the same? Okay. So basically the top of 4, going into the top of 4. This one seems ridiculously unachievable because, like I said, if you're losing the game, whatever. However, something to note here. Now, it's going to depend on what the primary scorings are. So far, we've only seen one. And that one, for holding a primary, you get 4 points. So if you can hold 3 points, if you're going to hold 3 points that are not within your deployment zone, and you're going to get 12 points for that, and you're thinking, all right, well, there's been plenty of times where it's like, yeah, I can hold 3 at the end of the game, but I'm only going to get 12 points, and I'm down by 15, right? I can't win. This gives you 8 more points than that. So something to consider it in a close game where you think like, yeah, I can probably hold 3 at the end of the game. It will potentially score you more points than just holding those 3 by themselves. Again, depends on what the other primaries are. So we're going to have to wait kind of and see. But this one, while it initially seems unviable, I think it could be viable depending on, what you got.
All right. So hear me out. So I've played less tournament games than I would like in the last year or two, but traditionally I've played a ton of games, and a lot of our audiences, there's a tournament contingent on that. And even if you're not, uh, I play MSU style lists in general, and I find that I'm either losing the primary like pretty hard, or I'm just dominating it. This gives me something that is a go-to for me, honestly. And here's why. So a lot of my pieces are on the board. They're doing the support things, or they're whittling down my opponents, and I might just not be able to capture an objective simply because I have smaller units at that particular time, and they are taking the center of the board. I have my home objective. I'm able to secure that, but I just don't have enough oomph in the center of the board or their deployment zone to really get the primary. But by that third turn, all of my pieces are in play. I'm able to start killing units and taking them off the board. And that's where I use my 15 plus units to steal objectives at the end of the game. So I'm playing them around the board, um, moving around my puzzle pieces, and at the last turn, it's especially good if you're the second player. But you drop an impulsor on an empty objective that you just killed off, and then you move the last little bit of your Primaris Crusaders on another one because you just killed off that final piece of that unit over there, and they just don't have your opponent doesn't have enough pieces to be able to get there. I think this is going to be the go-to for me in my style lists for that. If I'm not going to score 20 points, or even if I maybe get um, 25 or even 30, but I'm not going to be able to get any more than that. Getting 40 and gaining an extra 5 points or something like that, even if I lose, cap out at that 20 primary points, is going to be significant because it's extra points. I honestly really like this one because I find at the end of the game, I am capturing a ton of objectives, even though I'm losing or potentially losing earlier on in the game. I have more units than my opponent, so they're not able to defend all of those objectives. Wherein I can come crashing down on all of those objectives towards the end of the game, capture more of them than my opponent, and then score 20 points for free and steal the game from them. So it's just something I think is probably the best of all of them, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's deceptively good for sure. All right. So that is all they previewed for us. Bob, what are your final thoughts on this preview?
I
You
think
excited?
I like it a lot. I felt that Leviathan was really balanced. I like the tactical objectives, so it's going to be really interesting to see what the secondary missions are. I think they were very strategic on only previewing the one, but even if they don't dictate which mission rules and primary mission that they do, like they did with uh, Leviathan, I like that they're focusing a little bit more on battle line. We'll talk a little bit more about this going forward and like list building and such, but I think that you're going to probably want to take at least 2 battle line, maybe even 3 in your list going forward. My lists currently run 2 battle line in the form of the Primaris Crusader squads, and just because that there's so many things that are really kind of keying into the battle line. Now we're going to have to see what those points are and whether or not we're going to be the missions that are suggested for tournament play are going to be ones that are going to be important for the battle line. But right now, I'm considering changing up my list and play testing different things with that third troop in there, the battle line unit. I think that 2 to 3 is going to be really your happy space. But I like the way that they're worded on a lot of these different things. I'm glad the gambits are out because those are trash. This at least gives you something to think about. I really
Yeah.
like it, honestly.
Yeah. I feel the same way so far. I liked everything that I've really previewed, and now that I've had a chance to digest it. Um, I think that if the other mission rules, the other primaries, other secondaries follow this, I think they did mention too that they're changing up the deployments a little bit. If the rest of them follow suit with what these are like and how they're written, I think it's shaping up to be a really good new season of Warhammer. So that's it. That's the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to click all the YouTube algorithm buttons there. Smash the subscribe, like, blah, blah, blah. You know what to do. We greatly appreciate the support of everyone, especially our patrons. We couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so much. I know we've been a little content dry of late. We're hoping to turn that around here soon. If you're interested in our Patreon, what it has to offer, we've got a lot of great benefits. So don't forget to check that out. We have things like exclusive dice, exclusive roles, Discord channel, all that kind of good stuff. And then speaking of Discord, check out our Discord channel. A lot of great conversations going on every day there. So until next time, keep on crusading.